Karen has given me the okay to go ahead and get started, so I am excited to be here today with you all. This is going to be a fun group. I can see from your questions already. This is going to be fun. I told Karen I don't need a long introduction, but I will just share a few things. I'm Carrie Keller. I have now been with K-State since 2002, and that's like 15 plus. I've kind of lost count now. Been back here for quite a little while. I have worked in college settings and in career services actually for my profession. Yes, that really is a job. And it really does prove that psychology graduates really do go on and have very promising careers, which is something we will talk about today. I have also worked at small colleges in Ohio and a little college called Denison University there. I did a master's degree at Indiana State. And then I was, my first director's role was at University of North Carolina, Asheville. Not the Tar Heels, but another beautiful part of North Carolina. But I am originally from this area. I grew up in Council Grove. And so when I had the chance to come back and be part of K-State, in 2002, I just jumped at that opportunity, and I have loved being at K-State. What I'm also kind of amazed at, how many of you are actually K-State graduates of some degree of, so good, about half, and a few, and Val as well, we'll introduce you here in a minute. One of the things that's really struck me about K-State in my experience there in the career services area is that K-State, with over 20,000 students, attempts to deliver this kind of small college experience at a very, high volume, really. And it's one of the things that makes my job really fulfilling and also really challenging because of that delivering at that high volume. And matter of fact, one of the things we're going to talk about is that you all represent a whole lot of different kinds of industries here today, and at K-State, we represent a lot of different disciplines beyond just the colleges that we have. And I will show you some information that I think there are close to 100 different internship courses that our students can take. So you can imagine that that means there is great variety among how we manage and deliver that internship experience to students. I want to introduce Valerie Bo, who is also here with me today. She's our Employer Relations Associate, and several of you have probably gotten to know her through Herman and through the chamber experiences. And she is the person that you all as employers, I just want you to be able to connect with her today if you have additional questions, and if I've shared information that kind of makes sense but you don't remember what it was that I specifically said, then Val is going to be your point person after today that can help you navigate some of the network, and I'm just going to say a little bit of the maze that sometimes we set up at universities. I have had the opportunity to actually work really closely with a lot of our students that are doing internships while they're going through their K-State experience. And this is our few photos of students that I have worked with through a class that I teach, but it's a very small class. But we were actually talking, Val and I were talking about this young man right here. What is his first name? Romaine. And you can see this I think is the United Nations, it's the World Food Program. He was in a class that I taught a few years ago, and one of the interesting things about him is that while he's a rock star student, when I asked him how he found out about this opportunity, and this is so classic internship, he said he was at home, his dad was watching a 60 Minutes TV show, and he just started kind of overhearing some of what they were explaining about this program. And so then what did he do? He said, wow, I would really kind of like to do something like that. And he goes and gets on his computer and looked up the information and then applied, and although it was a very competitive process, that's how we ended up finding out about that kind of opportunity. So I think even though we can all share lots of ideas about how you recruit more students and how we, that there are some ways to do that, it is challenging, I think, in today, as Chris and I, we were kind of talking about, when you look over a span of several years, I'm going to be sharing some things today that aren't really, going to sound all that novel and new, but I think, it's just the realization that our students are doing some of the same things we have done all, throughout the 30 years I've spent in this field, but then there's this thing with being able to access information from all over the world that I think has posed new challenges for many of our employers and recruiters. All right, let's keep going here. Whoops, now that did work. There we go. So, I guess I would first, even though I've asked you some questions here, I would like to hear from you all. I mean, why do you all want to be able to do internships? We're going to talk a little bit about why students might, but why do you all want?
Talent.
Talent.
Yeah, recruiting. Yeah.
Talent, recruiting. So, building the pipeline. Okay, what else?
Beyond that, Connie is trying to develop more of an experience where people come to work at Connie for the experience and the exposure that they get. And so this would go along hand in hand with that, whether they're hired on through recruiting or just word of mouth that they enjoy what they did.
Right. So you are probably in one of those fields, kind of like my husband being in insurance, that sometimes there are perceptions of what certain industries or fields might be like. And so sometimes to kind of dispel some of those stereotypes or to help people understand more about what those areas are like would be really helpful. Yeah. What else?
Well, the health department, we used them to augment staff. I mean, really, we only have a limited amount of money and nobody's giving us any more. So we have new projects or other kinds of activities to do, then we use interns.
Yes.
Or volunteers.
Great, yes. Volunteers and interns, and we'll talk a little bit about, sometimes kind of distinguishing between those two. But especially, I totally understand that because in our office in the Career Center, we employ several student interns to help us extend ourselves as well. You might also even be interested to know that, when we look at some of the internship studies we've done of students, the university actually ends up employing a number of its own students in internship opportunities, as well as you all around the community as well. What else? Any other?
I'd say we have some additional motivations from the standpoint of promoting a firm like ours. We're a little bit different than a lot in the financial services area, and hopefully students will then go back to their colleagues at the university and share that, hey, I had this internship with this firm that I would never have thought of. The other part is trying to demonstrate that there are job opportunities here in Manhattan.
Yes.
We think it's a wonderful place to live, and so we try to promote that as well, because so many kids are focused on, I got to go to the big city.
Yeah. We have talked about that a lot in our Region Reimagined and some of the other conversations I've been involved with, that helping K-State students understand what kinds of opportunities even exist within the Manhattan area, I think is important. And employer branding is important, whether it is going to result in building your hiring pipeline or maybe future clients. That's another thing that I think some companies may kind of overlook. This is an opportunity for that word of mouth to build some of their knowledge and awareness of their services and their products as well. So
It's been interesting, compared to 30 years ago, we often tried to hire students I'm from the northwest part of Kansas, but you find folks from that region, good work ethic, they appreciate Manhattan, and this was like coming to Mecca for them.
Right.
But now we're finding some of those, they just skip right over. They want to go to Kansas City, I guess, so,
Well,
or Chicago.
I will address that a little bit, and that,
Perfect.
some of the challenges I think that exist within the Manhattan market is that, for one thing, we're in a tight job market right now across the country and really across the world. And so, I know that while when I first joined this field, there was concern about the state of Kansas kind of brain drain. Now what I see happening is each community is concerned. So Emporia wants to keep Emporia State, Wichita wants to keep Wichita State, K-State wants to keep Manhattan, but I can also tell you that Wichita would really like for K-State grads to go there too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of competition. And one of the challenges, I think, for Manhattan, quite frankly, is when you are competing with other large corporates, they have career ladders and some of those salary structures that can be attractive at first glance to students. So I think internships are really that chance to have the student know you beyond some of those first glance kinds of things. So I really do think internships, and actually I'm going to share with you here in a little bit, the concept of micro internships is something we're also going to be trying to promote more about across the Manhattan area as well. I also just wanted to share with you all, from the standpoint of education and from the standpoint of students, one of the reasons that we really encourage internships are because of some of these kinds of reasons. And I won't get into a whole lot of, education ease, but I think it is important for you all to know that while those are, many of those are benefits for you all, what we really value from the education perspective is that internships and that kind of hands-on experience, this is not, anything probably, again, brand new, but, if you think back to the hands-on experiences that you've had, those are probably some of the experiences that made the most difference to you along the way of probably your education. And research does show that when students have these kinds of hands-on experiences, they retain information, they get this ability that what they learned in the classroom, they actually might use someplace else. So they get to transfer their knowledge from the theoretical to the applied. Some of the research actually shows that when students have these kinds of experiences, they're going to come back and be more engaged with their education, and it actually can lead to higher grade point averages. Another really interesting thing, and I think that, as I've been involved with Region Reimagined and so forth too, that many of our historically underrepresented students, underrepresented in terms of ethnicity, race, many of those students, the research shows that they gain even more from hands-on internship experience. That again leads to a lot of these really positive outcomes that we in education are most interested in. We even, of course, in education have a term for all of these, and some of my own personal research then has been on internships as one of these things that we call a high impact practice. So if you've had students that have been in college, you've gone through the experience yourself, you might recognize some of these other kinds of things. First year experiences. We don't just do those in the higher education environment just because we like to make it fun, but because it really, the research shows it leads to this kind of student engagement that helps students persist and move on to graduation. We encourage undergraduate research, again, for some of this hands-on experience. But that is, again, why internships fall within this category of high impact practices and are so valued to us. I think, as I was even just chatting with Chris a little while ago, and he brought up, the term apprenticeship. We could probably go around this room and name all kinds of different terms that are out there for experiential learning, hands-on experiences. When I was doing some of my research in Australia and in some other countries, they call it work integrated education. So, I mean, we don't use that term necessarily here, but there are lots of different terms. And sometimes there are distinctions that can be made by discipline. I think there were, are any of our architect firms here? I don't think I saw any of you all. But I was going to say that there are some areas and professions that will use some terms more than others. Internships, co-ops, field experiences, what are practicums? Any other terms you've heard used?
Work study.
The what?
Work study?
Work study. Close, but yeah, it has some of the same kind of elements, yeah. So, at K-State a few years ago, when we were trying to come up with a way to actually count how and measure some outcomes of our students doing internships, we had to have a long conversation about, well, what is even an internship? How would we define that? And so at K-State, using some of the national information that's also out there, we defined an internship as an educationally related work experience that integrates knowledge and theory with practical application in a professional setting. Now, we could all probably think of exceptions to the rule, and there quite often are. But I would suggest that there needs to at least be several of these elements if you really are going to call it an internship. I will say co-op is another one of those terms that, especially if you are hiring engineers or hiring people out of a more technical field, you'll hear that term used more because that has come up through the discipline of engineering, science, and technology. Again, it could mean just an internship, but co-ops typically are associated with in the academic year. So during a fall semester or during a spring semester, and would essentially replace the student actually being in class. One of the things you can't really see on this, but maybe you can at least get the idea here, is that when we finally did agree how we were going to count internships at K-State, what we have found is that this is credit, doing internships for credit, and doing internships without any academic credit. Most of our students do internships without any academic credit. Now, in hospitality, they have like 3 different classes that they do that are part of their required program. I was trying to think in construction science, I don't think they have any required. And actually in engineering, what's interesting is that at K-State, we don't typically have any credit that is assigned for co-op or internship experiences. Highly structured in architecture, but it really kind of depends on the discipline. But for the most part, and this orange right here is representing that most students at K-State do non-credit internships over the summer. Now you can say from a local perspective, wow, we're really missing out on that. But you could also turn it into your advantage in that you all are right here in students' backyards, and if you are able to accommodate more of their schedule during the fall or during the spring, you may have a real advantage to engaging with students during that time. Am I just hot, or is it really like hot?
It's real hot.
It is hot in here. Are we able to,
There we go.
yeah, turn down the, woo? Because, I mean, even I may start falling asleep here if it gets too warm. So, one of the things I just want to generally kind of go over is that there are, I think, some basics that I think are important as you think about either introducing an internship program, or if you have one that is established, what are some of the kinds of things that are going to give you an edge and help you go for more of that good to great kind of internship program. And one of the things that the research and literature suggests is that internships need to be done well for students and employers to get the most out of internships. The challenge is figuring out, well, what does it really mean to be done well? So, a few of those keys are that internships done well require commitment. And for just a little bit of audience engagement here, and since you all have spread yourself out across the room, I'm so glad. Somebody has what Lee said. In my research, I actually gathered comments from students and supervisors and faculty advisors about their internship experience, about students' internship experiences. And does somebody have Lee? Oh, good. Craig, would you be willing to, what did I think Lee was a student, and what did she say about what commitment means?
That's fine.
So you can just read that little.
I have Wayne, I'm sorry.
Oh, you got Wayne, who has Lee?
I got my slide picture said Lee, and I thought, oh, you got
You
it?
guys have- Oh, there we go. All right, so what did Lee say?
If you go into an organization that doesn't know what to do with you, you won't get anything out of it. This has been a program that has been happening for years and years, so they have the guidelines and handbooks. They had training, they had all these things for us, ready for us. We knew exactly what we were getting into.
Okay, so, since we said we were going to share secrets, here are some of those secrets. If you haven't been utilizing these already. One of some of the secrets to that level of commitment is assigning a supervisor. And that can be challenging sometimes when your staff is already stretched, but you also don't want to have a student come in and not be prepared and help them and have somebody be their go-to that's very clearly who's going to help them navigate your organization and kind of guide them on their way. You may have varying levels of an orientation approach, but I think having some kind of guide, again, thinking about your new full-time employee, how would you orient them? And how could you utilize some of those same practices to help an intern get oriented? That's going to help them see your commitment to their experience. And also, and this is where I guess thinking back to the comment about volunteer versus paid intern. Offering compensation is certainly going to be a benefit. And many of our students at K-State do work already in part-time jobs. And so for them to be able to carve out time to be able to actually do some meaningful related experience with their major, it is really helpful for them to have compensation. The other flip side from a human resource standpoint is that with fair labor standards, if you give students meaningful work, which is what you're going to see in another slide, that students want that kind of experience to be meaningful, then you may be, if you're not paying that student, you may be at risk of violating some of the fair labor standards. So compensation can still be very reasonable and can still be much less than a regular full-time employee, but being able to offer compensation is going to really help you with recruiting and retaining that particular, those students. However, I would also say there's all kinds of perks that you might be able to provide as well. And one of the things we were talking a little bit about the current generation, and they like to be able to access executives and access leaders. And so those can be some of your perks, is being able to help them network with people in the profession, with people that are leaders in your field. Think about activities, especially, I mean, we've talked a little bit about how it'd be great to be able to facilitate some activities for interns in the Manhattan area. But think about activities within your organization, within your industry, that you can involve students in. That can also be another nice perk. And of course, who doesn't value parking? We may not have any big parking issues here for most of your businesses, but if you do, being able to provide those students with easy and convenient parking as they are going from, sometimes from class to class and other kinds of things would, be just another kind of common kind of perk that you might not even really think about. Again, not a really earth-shaking idea here, but for internships to be done well, you've got to be able to facilitate good communication. And I think there is a quote from Colleen. Where is Colleen? All right.
I think just being vocal about what I wanted out of it. Guys in another department would take me out to lunch quite a bit. This place is pretty much male-dominated. There are only 2 women who work there, about 20-some men. So I asked, do you guys get very many female interns here? They made the comment that a while ago they had 2 female interns at the same time, but neither of them ever talked. They both looked very similar, and they kind of thought that they were almost the same person. They didn't show up very often. They didn't talk much. They said you have done a really good job about putting yourself out there and showing interest in things.
So I love this quote because it illustrates more than just communication. It also illustrates some of that, helping the student understand how to navigate the workplace and understand maybe differences and different kind of worldviews and so forth. So a couple of the keys to think about in terms of facilitating good communication is sometimes I think when we do our own job, we kind of take it for granted. And I think when you have an intern, you have to almost kind of put on this cap of, well, how would somebody else who doesn't know anything about this, how would I explain how to do that? So sharing your knowledge, sharing your practical experience is what the student is going to love. It might not seem like it's really earth-shattering insights that you might have, but you would be surprised with a student that hasn't had any experience. Communicating clear experience. This is some of our expectations. This is some of the navigating the generations that might also be really important. When we talk about dress with students, there are so many different standards for dress depending on industry, size of company, all of those kinds of things. And I don't even know if you all have heard some of these new terms that are out there, like dress for your day. So it's not business casual, it's not professional business, it's dress for your day. Well, if a student doesn't know what to expect in that day, then you all know that if you're going to meet with a client, you probably are dressing one day or one way. I'm dressing a certain way to do a presentation, but on Friday before a football game, I'm wearing all my purple. And so helping students navigate what the expectations for dress, for taking breaks, for using their phone, I mean, for all of those things, again, that you kind of take for granted, being really clear and sharing your expectations is important. Providing feedback. I think if there's one thing that I hear consistently from students who go through my class, and I see Hillary nodding her head back there, who works with groups of interns for her company, that students want your feedback. And I think sometimes we think we're doing them a favor by, maybe trying to soften it, but students want to know how they can get better, how they can improve. And so being able to share both positive feedback, but what you also see as some of their growing edges can be really helpful to them. I'm going to share some resources with you that if you don't have a formal way of doing that, I think you can do it informally through having, again, regular meetings with your intern. It's going to take, again, commitment and some communication, sharing regular feedback, but then having probably a formal process, maybe like you have for your full-time staff, to be able to provide at the end of their, maybe the middle and the end of their internship experience, maybe a rating and some feedback about what you see as their strengths and weaknesses. Hillary, what do you have a formal process?
Yeah, we're highly structured. We found that the more structured we are, the better job the mentors can do, and it also makes our interns much happier. They meet with their mentor once a week for a 5-minute stand-up. Tell me what went well, tell me what didn't go well, tell me what you learned, and tell me about your plan for next week. That way everybody knows what's happening. We meet the first week they're there, and then 6 weeks later to plan on objectives for those 6 weeks. Then they rate each other, both at the midpoint and the end of the time, and we share it.
The interns rate each other?
No, the interns rate the mentors. Mentors rate the interns. Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
We find that the better the mentor, the better the intern experience.
Yeah.
Those things directly line up. And we also find that the mentors like the feedback,
Yes.
right? And we encourage the mentors. You are building an employee, right? Don't pull punches. Be a nice human, right? But at the same time, you're potentially building your next employee.
Yeah,
Maybe do that, right?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's great.
How long are your internships?
We run both a summer intern program that averages about 11 weeks, and then I also run a year-round experience here at K-State. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Great. All right, another maybe rather not surprising, but again, you're taking on an important role in connecting the classroom experience to the career. So asking students, what they have learned in their classroom setting, and then thinking about how you can apply what they are learning, that hopefully is kind of cutting edge in terms of their industry, can be really helpful. So what did Wayne say about connecting? There we go.
Now I
Craig.
finally have the right one. We've had some internship hosts that turn the course over to the student for a week as the golf course superintendent. They are essentially the superintendent. The superintendent is an employee and won't answer questions. A lot of times they have to make a decision, and it is a student who meets with the general manager every day. Great experience.
So, I don't know if you all know, we actually, in the hospitality area, and we have a golf course management program that I thought, what could really be a meaningful internship in golf course management? But what I learned is that, students can go out on the course and they can recognize every single kind of weed that is growing up through that turf. But it's only through the experience of, so tell me, what do you see as we're driving in this little golf cart? What weeds do you see emerging, and how would you treat those? So again, they are really applying what they have learned in the classroom to seeing it in action there. Some other, whoops, what did I do here? Oh, I think I keep turning this around. Those of you in the human resource area will recognize this KSAOs. These are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other kinds of characteristics that you typically use to write your full-time job descriptions. It's really helpful to be able to utilize those for your internship job descriptions. ONET is a Department of Labor resource that is on our webpage that I will share with you that might be a way for you to model some of this in a job description if that is something that you don't have in your other full-time positions. But again, this is part of setting expectations with students and helping them see how analytical skills are going to be important in what you're expecting of them in their internship. Many of you have already shared, that it's this idea of a realistic job preview that you're trying to set up. If you do eventually want to hire students, to have a pipeline, you want to build your internship to be as closely aligned to what they might actually do in a regular job with you. And again, over and over, besides feedback, the other thing that we always hear from students is, please give me meaningful projects. And it doesn't mean you have to take lots of risks with those, but think about those projects that you put on the back burner that you've said, oh gosh, I just don't have time to get to that that video that explains to everyone how to do X, Y, and Z. Those are some things that students they could really take ownership of that and utilize a lot of different experiences to do that. They're hungry for that kind of meaningful experience. And lastly, internships done well facilitate a sense of community. And this might be a little bit, maybe a little bit surprising, but what did Talia say about that?
There was one lady who would have been the main designer representative, and she was an older lady. So of course, she had been there for years, and she was a really awesome person. It was just me and her when we were there. She was just very inspiring, and she was kind of in your face, growing up in New York. She just wasn't afraid to say what it was and say how it was, I guess. She just taught me a lot about going out and getting what you want and not being afraid to voice your opinions. She taught me more about life, I think, than anything else.
This is also what we hear from students all the time, is when they make connections with people in your workplace. And it doesn't have to, again, be the owner or the CEO. I think in this case, this was a reception, a person at the reception desk, but the student connected with that person. And if you don't think, if you really observe students in their internship, you'll see them connecting sometimes with those people that are a little bit kind of on the sidelines. I don't know, I think sometimes they feel a little bit safer with some of those people that might not be out front, but they make important connections to lots and lots of different people. It's great when you can have groups of students as interns because they can also connect with one another as well. So I think, again, it's that sense of welcoming the intern, facilitating as much interaction, include the students, the student interns in your staff activities and those fun things that you do to build trust and teamwork and those kinds of things. They love being able to do that. And do think about, as Hillary was saying, a mentor, a supervisor that is approachable and is going to help create a positive experience for the student, I think is going to be important. So at the end of the day, probably these 4 things, these are very general kinds of things. We're going to dig into some of your specific questions, but really these are the things that make a big difference in an internship that is done okay and an internship that's really done well, is facilitating that sense of community, communicating clear expectations, involving approachable staff, and really thinking about meaningful duties that the student can be involved with. Now, we're going to dig into some of these questions, but I wanted to let you know that actually some of the more specific kinds of resources we have online for starting an internship or building out an internship are on a brand new page that we have created. That if you go to our webpage, and at the very last slide, you've got our ksu.edu/career center website. You'll go to employers, jobs and internships, and there is a successful internship program link. I don't know if I can go online right now, but it has built out some examples of job descriptions. We have got a little kind of analysis you could do about, are you ready to host an intern? What else is on there? We have some information about how to publicize and promote your internship. The other thing I want to talk a little bit, I'm going to actually back up because maybe we won't talk about this yet, but we are also introducing another idea that if you don't feel like you're ready to launch a full-blown internship program, we're also involved with some other area universities, Highland, Cloud County, and Manhattan Christian College and K-State are going together to create a micro internship program. And this would be more for freelance kinds of projects or really specific projects if you don't think you're ready to host an intern for an entire semester or something like that. But let's go back here and look at some of the questions that you all have shared.
Also, MATC is another.
Oh, and I didn't say MATC, thank you. Yes. All right, so here is a good question. So, how do we find the right students for the right skill sets that you are interested in? So, Val, do you want to suggest anything here? I guess one of the things I was going to point out to you is that on the back, you all have our recruitment guide here. One of the things that we would encourage you to think about is, and I think this might have come from you all in terms of design, one of the things that many employers may not know is that there are typical kinds of majors that you might think of that relate to your projects, and then there's others like ag communications. You wouldn't really think about ag communications and our advertising, marketing kind of area, but there are a lot of different majors that could relate to that. We can help you navigate and make connections to those different departments that you might not traditionally think about. The other thing that I think can be helpful is the ONET resource that we have linked on our website does then look at those skill set and helps you think about different kinds of majors or other kinds of degrees that might be a good fit for that. But with several hundred majors at just one university, there's probably, you add MATC, Cloud County, Highland, Manhattan Christian, there's a rich array of majors, but there are some that may be better matches than others. I'm going to skip.
I think Handshake is another great piece of that.
And Handshake,
Let them find you.
Yes, I do think that the advantage of Handshake, which is the online system that the K-State Career Center utilizes, is that sometimes the student can end up finding, if you will, again, put a description together that really describes the knowledge, skills, the kind of experiences that you are looking for, then that student can say, well, gosh, yeah, we hired a biology major to help us critique resumes. Now that doesn't really sound like that goes together, but that student found us and then convinced us that she did have the skills that she was trainable and could do that kind of position. So that is one of the great advantages of a system like that. How are the internships organized and monitored by K-State? I think this is where I'm going to, I guess what I have to do is actually, if I want to go online, can I jump in there or can I have the keyboard out here? I was going to show you that on this successful internship program webpage, you'll find a list of all of the courses that are offered at K-State across disciplines. And what I would say to this particular question is that if students are getting academic credit, they are monitored, internships are monitored by a faculty person that is in charge of a particular class, but as I showed you, most students are not doing academic credit-based internships. So it is why we really rely on the quality control that you all do in terms of your internship if the student is not getting academic credit.
Carrie?
So, yes.
Just curious, I'm assuming that academic credit can be given for internships that are paid.
Yes.
Okay.
There are no, well, I guess I should back up and say, there are some areas of the university that will say they will not give academic credit if an internship is paid. That has traditionally happened in engineering. But it's not really a valid criteria.
I'm
So-
assuming that the concern would be somebody's already got a job
That can be the
and they say, let me
concern.
see if I can
Right.
get credit for
But-
just doing my job.
Yes, but for the most part, most students are being paid and may also then be getting academic credit. The one thing we hear from parents, if the student isn't getting paid and is also paying tuition to go and work for someone but not get paid but pay tuition, that's a little bit of a confusing
Why would the
proposition.
parents be involved?
Well, parents that are helping pay tuition.
Their damn business.
Oh, you'd be surprised. It is a lot of
No, I'm not surprised anymore, but it's, I still take the same perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Here's this page I've been referring to. And so here is the list of K-State internship courses. So we'll see if this actually comes up. So there is a list of all of the different courses that are available for students at the university. You can see, I mean, there's a whole variety. There's architecture, there's golf course, there's lodging, there's animal science. So students might do your internship for credit, but it would be their responsibility to bring those requirements to you and to share those early on. For the most part, they are not going to be having any of these kinds of requirements. So, many different ways that kind of happens. How do we keep interns busy when I'm busy doing my job? Planning ahead enough, but staying flexible. What do you all think? Is there anybody that's got a secret to this?
Well,
Chris?
that's something that really resonates with me because I've seen both sides of it, but it's not unusual for a active chamber member, business owner to say, yeah, I'll do this, it's great for the community, and then dump this intern on a shop supervisor. Hey, I gave you an intern.
You've
don't
got a
have time to
cheerleader
eat
back
lunch
there,
or
Chris.
anything else.
That lady agrees with you
This
right
lady
there.
agrees, yes.
Yeah.
That happens,
And I
yeah.
think that's not unusual, and the poor supervisor, okay, why don't you grab that broom? That
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
So I'd like to see a follow-on program for supervisors or business owners, how to deal with
Yeah.
internships.
I mean, that actually would be a really interesting training, I think, to do. I think part of this does get at the challenge of there are many benefits to having student interns, but it almost takes an equal amount of commitment of time and energy and supervision to make it worth the business proposition of it, and for the student to walk away with a positive experience that they've done meaningful duties and so forth. I do think, the planning ahead though, and having projects, again, that you put on your back burner and you think, what is something that a student could do pretty independently, that I could just figure out some different check-in points with them, keep monitoring their progress, but also not micromanage them and give them some lead. You got to kind of measure the risk for that too. Val?
I know, like, for one of my interns, it was like an event planning internship. So every year that same event took place during that same time of the year. So my supervisor, like, every year I always, give the intern the responsibility to take on this event and plan it. And it's like your little baby. So you get to plan this event. And so
exactly.
next year, the next intern would have done that event as well and taken it into their hands. So if you have like a consistent event or project, that could be something you could do. And it's kind of interesting to see how each intern will take that project and take it on. So that could be something that can help too. So.
That's
The
great.
interesting thing is that shop supervisor who got the intern dumped on him would have had a whole list of projects the intern could have done if he'd gotten more than 15 minutes of
Right,
notice.
yeah.
And that's what we really work on, like that communication and the understanding that this is how, and getting the whole team on board and everyone understanding that they're all intern mentors, top to bottom, front to back. And at one point or another, you get to impact this person's education, and it's up to you to do your best.
It sounds like a management training issue with the boss.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think, some
Yeah.
of that is, you really get to the organizational development piece of it that sometimes is challenging. How do you best position students for understanding our goal of using student internships as an assessment and recruiting tool for permanent employment? So I'm not entirely sure I understand this question, but I guess I would say that just recognizing what your business interests are and recognizing that those are maybe different than what the student is coming in with interests of learning something new, gaining experience, quite frankly, building their resume. So I think the more you can tie what their interests are with what your interests are, the more successful you're probably going to be. I do think also, because internships are now utilized so much as really the #1 recruiting tool that many employers utilize, it's important to share some of those opportunities and expectations with students very early on, to even, maybe in the first 6 weeks be able to say, we've actually hired interns into these kinds of full-time positions, or we, often have these kinds of opportunities, so the student can make that connect of, oh, wow, if I do good in this internship, they might actually consider me for something in the future. But I think then also being able to share with that student how you may have contacts within your industry, within the area, that kind of social capital, that's a really valuable part, a valuable outcome for students is also one of those benefits that students are looking for, access to those kinds of networks. We were talking about a fashion design student. I mean, that is one of those areas that sometimes does not have paid internships and sometimes they have come under some legal scrutiny for that, but they have utilized their network is what is valuable to students who do those kinds of internships. So, thinking about matching your interests as best you can.
Hey, Carrie, that was my question.
Is that yours?
there.
Yeah.
And part of it is, we felt like we got, a little bit of bait and switch, I guess, on a few interns where we made it pretty clear that if you determine that this looks like an appealing place and we determine that you would be an appealing candidate for a full-time role, we would welcome that opportunity. And we thought we were on that pretty good path, and at sort of the end of it, or at some point through that internship, they said, oh yeah, of course, when I take my job in Kansas City, and and when I get married, and my wife or my husband is, one who's going to graduate school there, that was all apparently laid out but never communicated to us, or was what I would contend was withheld from us.
Right.
Yeah, we
Well-
would have selected a different candidate.
I would say that this is something we certainly see happening with not just.
We got played a little bit, as I think.
Well, you might be surprised though, the employment, the social contract of employment is not what it used to be. And a lot of our students have seen their parents get laid off and not have seen that sometimes companies don't have the same loyalties to employees that they've had in the past. I would like to say that we are still trying to teach our students appropriate professional ethics and some of those kinds of unwritten rules of the workplace, but we do hear from a variety of companies that about sometimes students reneging on opportunities that they have made a verbal commitment to. And some of that comes from the fact that, I don't know, that significant other that they started out in the internship might have just been, a girlfriend, boyfriend at that point, and then all of a sudden did become something
wasn't
more
it,
significant. Well, and sometimes you are, and sometimes students are. Sometimes students are also finding out that, wow, this isn't what I thought it would be, and gosh, now I think I'm changing my mind.
And
And I
again,
think
those weren't the circumstances. It was situations where, had they shared information that at the beginning or at the time they were accepting the internship, we would have perhaps made a different decision when they had no intention of accepting a position.
Yeah. I think those are hard, they're hard things to screen out sometimes, and some of that is the art of recruiting and some of there are risks that do come, I think, with this.
We've changed our protocol a little bit,
so-
and now we have a question that says, is there any information with which you are aware at this time that would preclude you or make you inclined not to accept a full-time position at the conclusion of this internship?
Yeah.
That's all we're asking for. We don't.
I would be, as a student, I'd be really hesitant to answer that, yeah.
But you can't ask kids if they're gonna get married or if they're pregnant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess,
About
Well,
I would also say, though, there are some legal implications, though, to promising a job, and an internship is structured so that actually the employer is not promising a job, because it becomes
Oh, yeah.
a different kind of employment relationship. But yeah, I mean, you are encountering the same kinds of, I think, struggles that all of our employers are.
And it'd be nice to know
challenged
at the
by.
beginning, they said, yeah, my plans are to live in Portland, or Miami.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like Manhattan, Kansas.
I would also challenge that you're lucky that they left. I've found that
You
over
are
time.
correct. One of them we probably wouldn't necessarily have hired.
Yeah, I think in all, you have to have a little bit of faith in the world spinning on its axis in the right way. And maybe you dodged a bullet with that one, you may have missed out on a good one, but you probably have a really good opportunity the next year to catch that again. Yeah.
That's very possible. Yes, Chris?
This also brings up another aspect. I had a boss
Thank you all.
that I cherished, and his instructions to me, I want you to hire 20-year employees. That's what I want you to do. Then I had to explain to him that we aren't guaranteeing 20-year employment by any means. And some of our best employees that I brought, that I had to convince him to keep, were military spouses and K-State spouses. And I finally convinced him 2 good years, great, I'll move on to the next one. But that's a hard sell with
Yeah.
overtime.
Everybody's 2 weeks away from leaving, if you're
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah,
right?
and that's what you
Yeah.
have to, and that's what I think in the chamber, we need to try to share with our members.
That's part of the value of an internship, right? They get a 3-month interview of you as much as you get a 3-month interview of them, right?
Yes.
And you get that time to
That's
build a
good.
connection. If you give them meaningful work, they're like, oh my gosh, this is what a real job looks like here. I work for an ag company. If we handed them a shovel for 3 months, their expectation would be, this would be my whole career here is this shovel.
Yes.
We don't do that. We learned, we figured it out. So I do think that, I would argue there aren't a lot of 20-year employees out there anyway, at this point, that you would want. Anyone that's, at this point, anyone that's been going to be there for 20 years is flying under the radar, hiding from somebody. I really do
I
think...
finally retired.
I know, right? I'm one of those people, I had 5 jobs in 11 years.
Right.
And I was a fantastic employee while I was there and changed cultures and made impacts. But I was moving around, seeing the country, right? So it's a really interesting challenge. I would say focus more on finding those people that will come in and impact your company. Boy, if you can find 10 of those over 20 years, that's a real good sub for one 20-year employee.
I'm with you.
Yeah. It's a different generation and a different expectation about the employee commitment and the employer commitment, I think, kind of at the same time,
It's
so.
like 1960.
Yeah, it's not, no. Well, we will finish there. I see it is 1 o'clock and I have now lost my presentation here, but I think at the end of your handout there, you have my email information and Val's. I do want to mention again the micro internship opportunity. I am assuming, Karen, that will I have access to email addresses? I will send a follow-up to you all and send you a link to the page that the web page that I referred to and more information about this MHK micro internship opportunity, because this might be another good way for you to kind of dip your toe into the internship area, or maybe if you have some really specific project kinds of needs with specific skill sets, this could be a really nice match for that. And Val, you wanted to mention
Yeah, I was
more
just
about
gonna
that?
say, my contact information is in here as well. And kind of, I know Hillary mentioned Handshake, which is separate from the micro internship. So if you weren't gonna do the micro intern, but you did wanna offer an actual internship, I highly encourage you to, if you don't have a Handshake account already, to create that and to post your internship there, or even part-time job, because our students use Handshake to look for those opportunities, so.
And Val is very helpful with that.
Yes. and I
She
can
is
help.
amazing.
Yeah, you can give me a call, make an appointment to come to our office, or
She's got a lot of patience.
through email too. I'm more than happy to help and assist you with any Handshake questions you guys have, so.
It's
And
great.
you owe all your success to a half-day job shadow at New Boston Creative Group.
That's right, yeah. Lots of creative ideas out there for engaging with students. So contact us, let us know how we can help you navigate the university and find the right students to meet some of your needs. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.